past is present is, I think, a leitmotif, a kind of thought that I'd like you to bear in mind today. It's as if when we look at these things, and this goes for Egyptian art, Greek art, Roman art, any historical period you like, you kind of come into that world. The artist, if they've come through the ages, you can sort of see it, not just through their eyes, but through their eyes and through your own eyes, and you sort of can blend in. And I think that's the magic of art all along the way. And strangely enough, it has sort of come up in the history of both my parents over the years. The second thing is Melinda, in her introduction last week to the Slava book, Modernist Art and Design, which we launched on Tuesday, she gave an excellent address. And her address was also along those lines. The history never stops. And she has found that in her research. She's done an amazing amount of research to create the book, which is here if you want to look at it, and you could also acquire it if you haven't already got it. But it delves into very much my mother's past, and she's gone through every document she could find. She's gone to Vienna, she's researched there, and so on and so on. And yet she is still finding things that are unknown to her. And one of the documents she found just the other day, she would have referenced it in her book if she'd seen it earlier, is in that showcase there, so you can have a look at it. And my mother's actually talking about, very early on, she's invented this foldable umbrella, and she's trying to market or get the patents passed all around the world, and she writes to Great Britain, to England, and she's written this letter, you know, this umbrella will be all around the world, sort of thing, you know. And the kind of thinking of this young woman, she's going to make this a marketable product all around the world. So that's kind of, the history is now. It's not, it's happening. And as we speak, this is also happening, and then somebody else will take it on further on. So that's the philosophy behind all this. Then we come to the tin tacks of what we're talking about today, and in particular, how amazing modern technology is, that it's bringing to life things that I never thought I would ever know or see, ever, right? And suddenly things happened through the internet. And one of the first examples of this is the Malay Boy. Now, most of you who've come before, and even those of you who are new to the museum, will know that sculpture on that picture there. And you can see the young Malayan boy and my father working on his portrait in that particular photo. Now, there was a journalist in Singapore who described that moment virtually. He's written this newspaper cutting describes it very, very well. It was written by an Australian journalist at the time, and the heading is Refugee Sculptor Models First Heads in Singapore. And just a couple of sentences on in my book, which I've quoted from that article. Hitler came to Vienna, and in those few hours, Karl Duldig, sculptor and sportsman, lost his career, his fortune and his home. He is now in Singapore, literally carving out a new life for himself with his chisel, his long fingers, and the clay he almost makes speak. Karl gives life to the dull grey clay. People see with their eyes, but Karl Duldig sees with his eyes and his hands. And it's such a perceptive comment that it deserves to be kind of remembered, I think, in that context. Now, why am I bringing that up? We've got that head, we've got a plaster of it. My father brought a plaster of it. Later on, he cast a bronze. But the story goes back to the very first exhibition that my father ran in Singapore, because he had an exhibition, well, he had more than one there, but the exhibition which I'm speaking about was a year after that article was written. This was written in June 1939. And about a year after, in August 1940, my father mounted an exhibition in Singapore. And this is what it says about the exhibition. The catalogue listed 76 items, most for sale. Apart from portraits and a number of large sculptures, there were masks, bowls and vases, as well as drawings and watercolours. Now then, it says, public response to the exhibition was remarkable. The Belgian consul bought a sculpture, and 15 other drawings and sculptures were sold to private patrons. However, the most interesting visitor to the exhibition was Robert Payne, a young Englishman. He had asked his driver to wait outside for a few minutes, but 2 hours later he was still in our place. Robert, the son of an admiral in the British Navy stationed in Singapore, was employed as the British armaments officer at the naval base. After his first visit, he set aside money from his pay packet to buy sculptures from Karl. He commissioned a bronze cast of the Malay Boy head and bought a stunning salt glazed head of a horse. And it goes on. And Robert Payne has written marvellous words about his experiences with my dad at that particular moment. So if we have here the plaster and a bronze cast which my father cast here, what happened to Robert Payne's bronze cast? And that was always a mystery, because I did make contact with Robert Payne after the war and after my father died, and even before my father died. And the talk ranged around, what have you got, you know? And he said, yes, Karl did a portrait of him, of Robert, and that went to England with Robert when Robert escaped from Singapore. But there was never a mention of the bronze Malay Boy. Why? You know, where is it? What's happened to it? Well, would you believe it? In 2009, I have to always check my notes for the dates because you get them wrong. But in 2008, I received an email with a photo of the Malay Boy in bronze with Karl's signature on the side. And from nobody, I didn't know the guy, nothing. And then further inquiry made me aware that this bronze Malay Boy was in Singapore with a family. And then we had to unravel that whole story, and we did. And this is what it says about here in Driftwood again. I'm purposely reading these things because most of this is in this book, but not everybody can sort of piece it together, and you have to sort of jump around a bit. But there is a good index. Anyway, so Payne escapes with his life. He had to flee for his life. He was very lucky to find Joseph, a local man of Indian descent who often chauffeured his father. Joseph drove Payne to safety at the British Embassy in Chongqing, from where he later managed to get passage to England. In gratitude, Payne gave Joseph the bronze head of the Malay Boy, which was kept safely by Joseph and his family. Now, I found that out at the moment after I got the email. I didn't know all that, of course I didn't. But when I found out it was in Singapore, I have still some very good friends in Singapore, and one of them was a student who spent some time here as an intern, Jeffrey Say, and I contacted Jeffrey and I said, go to this address, find out what you can. And he came back with all this information. So isn't that just amazing? The sculpture, the bronze, and Singapore Art Museum, I kept saying to them, look, get a bronze cast of this Malay Boy for your collection. No, we want the original. I couldn't give you the original. But when I knew the original was in Singapore, boom, and they bought it for their collection, and it's now in the National Gallery in Singapore. And I went over when the gallery, you've seen it? Yes. And some of the other members have seen it too. And I went over for the opening of that gallery in 2015 with Hori, and it was just marvellous to see the original displayed there. So that was the first of the internet kind of things that the internet does. The next one, in a way, is just as fascinating but totally different. It's the story of Rosa. And this is Rosa. Who is Rosa? Rosa. Now, she came into my father's early life. She was the daughter of Karl's uncle, Salo Nebensaal in Vienna. And the families shared apartment houses. Her family had an apartment in the same building as the Duldigs, and so everybody got to know each other and they all grew up together. And so Rosa Nebensaal was my father's first cousin. And so Karl, when he first started being a sculptor or taking up his career, his first portraits were usually of people in his family. And Rosa was one of the people who sat for Karl. So the sittings took place at 18 Kirchengasse, where the two families were neighbours. The fired head, this would be the unfired head, I think, Stefan, don't you think?
Hard to say, possibly.
Yes, that's a photo Dad took in Vienna, and it looks very much as if he's just finished it, you know. Was much admired by the family, not only for its physical resemblance, but also for Karl's ability to convey Rosa's personality. Rosa married Leo Garfunkel, a purchasing agent for Bloomingdale's department store in New York. The couple was well-to-do and lived in an opulent apartment at 80 Gladbachstrasse in Zurich. During the years when Karl competed in the Swiss tennis tournaments, he often dropped by for a few days to stay with his cousin. In 1938, when Karl fled from Vienna, he also stayed with the Garfunkels before he moved to Zug. So that remained a very close relationship. And of course, the family had the fired portrait. There she is. Now, that portrait, what happened to it later? In 2009, via the internet, I received an inquiry accompanied by an image of Karl's portrait of Rosa. The incised inscription, Karl Duldig, 1925, clearly visible in the photo. It came to light that the Garfunkel family, who migrated to the United States before the war, had never opened the crates containing the contents of their apartment, and instead paid for their storage. Everything had remained in storage for more than 50 years, and it was only after the last member of the Garfunkel family had died without an heir, and there was nobody to pay for the storage, that all the valuable contents of the family's Gladbachstrasse apartment were auctioned. Karl's portrait of Rosa and portrait of her husband Leo were sold. Eventually, after considerable negotiation, this is by me, Rosa was brought to Melbourne and is now in the studio. So it's in case you want to see it, it's in the studio down there. And it remains one of, I mean, there have been a couple of other occasions where people have said, oh, you know, this is your dad's work, blah, blah. But this was so important in the history. And also, I just love it. I think it's got so much character. She just comes to life. I really have a great affection for her. So that was the second big find, you could say, that we've benefited from here in the museum. And then we have now the most recent discovery. This one, and it's just up here on the wall. Again, this is very recent, and Stefan, I probably have in the database, we've got a note, but it's just before COVID, just BC. And again, via the internet, a clear signature, Karl Duldig, and the date is on there, 1919, his clear signature, which the person who found it in America, in a flea market, obviously thought was interesting enough to keep and to search who does it belong to. So he searched internet, Duldig, blah, and eventually found me. And of course I was totally astounded that after 100 years, virtually, this little drawing, it's absolutely tiny, could come back to us. And I, of course, immediately negotiated and got it back. I didn't let that one go at all. But it's probably I think, Stefan, probably the earliest drawing we have in the collection by my dad, of certainly self-portrait. There are one or two other self-portraits which are also Viennese, but this, I think, is the earliest. So we can see how the internet has played its part. And the story which I'm revealing to you today, the internet has also played its part. But let's go back to Singapore. So if we go back now to there. Here, a Malayan bungalow. And that's where I lived in Singapore with my mum and dad. We didn't own the thing, it would have been nice, but we didn't. But we rented, my parents rented the top floor, and a Chinese family lived in the ground floor. And that in itself was quite unusual, because the Western people did not normally share houses with the Chinese or any other of the Asian races. They kept themselves very much apart. But that wasn't my parents' style or their thinking. Now, so here we are, and here we are, next slide, and you'll see how, that's me, and then that's my dad, and the other two people are also significant. The monk is the monk who's in the drawings in the dining room, which most of you know. Monk became very famous. His name is Guang Kwai, and there's a lot written about him, and he had a long career, and even when I sort of eventually got to Singapore, people were still talking about him. So he was very much a figurehead later on. He's quite young there. And the other one is a very famous Chinese writer, Yu Da Fu. And he unfortunately lost his life in the Japanese invasion, but he was a Chinese nationalist. And he was, his work is also now still very much admired in China, in a province called Chongqing, or I've written it up, but I've forgotten off the top of my head. But his work is, literary work, is much studied in China today. So my father, little sculpture there as well, which is very typical of the sculptures in Singapore. What about the exhibition, which I've already mentioned? You saw those lovely verandas on that house. Well, this was Dad's exhibition in that house, and he used those verandas and had sculptures all around them. This would have been just before we left, and he had the exhibition we've read about here, and this is here. We haven't read about here, but I've told you about it. This is the actual catalogue, which is very much fragile, and it's full of the aging marks. But in it is Dad's own annotations, you know, and he's written, for example, I'll only turn to the back, Belgian Consulate, Singapore. But there are several other names inside. And remember, I said to you, nearly 20 items were sold. So among them were sculptures and drawings and so on and so on. So we would take another photo from that exhibition now. And that's the inside. And we have set my father was very good at documenting his exhibitions and his work. There's a wonderful album he actually put together of his own work in Singapore, and that's been an absolute godsend. Plus we of course have lots of negatives, most of which have been now put into positive, but there's probably still some we haven't. Remember, history and all that still come to light. So in there somewhere is an item. It's an item we're going to get much closer to today. So we're going to the next slide. Okay, so my father's career there ended, as most of you know, when we were forced to go from there to Australia as enemy aliens in September 1940, and were interned. The very last commission Dad had there was for Auburn Hall and the Tiger Balm King. And that is a working plaster, photo of the working plaster. And most of you will know also that my father never saw that completed in bronze, even though it was a commission, because we were forced to leave. But before the war, still, the founder had cast it into bronze, and my father was paid out. He got all the money that was owing to him. What happened to that sculpture, again, is very interesting. After the war, it was put up in the Tiger Balm Gardens in Hong Kong, and it was there for a very long time, and my mother and father discovered that through going to visit some friends one day in the 50s, mid-50s, when I was a young girl. A friend of mine's parents had gone around the world trip, and they invited Mum, Dave and I to see the slides, and the corner of one of the slides was, and Mum said, "Oh, stop." It was the first inkling they had that the whole thing had survived. So that was quite amazing. So it still has survived. The Tiger Balm Gardens in Hong Kong have been dismantled, but the daughter of Obun Ho, O Sian, Sally O, took that sculpture in the bronze, and she has re-erected it in the family's home city in another province in China, which I would have to refer to again. But again, that's again still living. Now, when we had this exhibition called the Malayan Bungalow between 2012 and 2013, and the curator of the exhibition, Yana Pfeiffer Hunt, she didn't want a traditional catalogue or anything. She produced a newspaper, a Malayan Bungalow, an exhibition supplement, she called it, and we've got a date, the Duldig Studio Gallery, incorporated in the date, the Duldig Studio, Duldig, December 2013, issue number 001, right? And it, of course, gives lots and lots of the stories, lost head found, refugee sculptors exhibition, when West meets East in Singapore, and it goes on through the pages. It's really quite remarkable. But here at the back, and you can come up and look at this, but I'll just hold it up. Have you seen these people? And you can see here mainly heads, portraits. We knew nothing about them. We had left. Everything was left where it was, except, as I mentioned, my father took the Malay Boy plaster cast. He also took this plaster cast of my mother, and he took one or two small, lovely little portrait of me that's in the bookcase, and one or two others of me from that period. But otherwise, all of this work, 76 sculptures in that exhibition, and all this wonderful works on the veranda, gone. So, then, what happens next? Well, we're getting to the end, you'll be glad to know. What are we going to find? Would you believe it, that not so long ago, this young man, Andrew, on the board, Andrew Dixon, in case those of you don't know, and he's very good at looking at the internet. And he sent me, and I think you might have sent to Anthony as well, Andrew, a photo. And it was of a sculpture, and again, a clear inscription, Karl Duldig, Singapore, 1940. Can you imagine 1940? All these things, all gone. What is it? What have we got? And there was a photo, and then you don't know the rest of the story. No, because we kind of took over after that. And I have a friend, we discovered that the work was in France. And I have a French cousin, Aurélie Laisné, my mother's sister. Her son is French, and he lives some of his time in Paris, some in Berlin, but he's French. And he took up the cause of looking for the sculpture and going to see it and all the rest of it. And I think he had to go to Toulouse, if I'm not mistaken, but he did see it. and he thought it was absolutely fantastic, and he has enabled it to come here. So it's time. It's time. Woo. Anyone take a picture? 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, that was lovely. Thank you for the spontaneous. For the spontaneous. Isn't that terrific? Well, there she is. Now, Stefan later on, I'm sure won't mind lifting it up and showing you clearly that incised inscription of Dad's underneath.
Very modern.
Isn't it?
Very modern.
So it's Egyptian sort of, but
There you
there's
go. You're all, here you are, you're creating history, remember?
Well, yeah, Egyptian.
You're all
Egyptian
putting your own imagination into this, and I'm so glad you are, because that's what I have to do too. There. There she is. And the next one. There she is in the middle. Wow. Now what happened? I'm giving you each a little souvenir. And I might just read it to you, because it kind of, I think it puts this sort of imaginative focus into this thing. I've given it a name for starters. I didn't know what the name was. I don't know anything about whether it's an imaginative piece, whether it was a portrait. We don't know. But let's take up her story. I've called her La Mademoiselle d'Or. Okay. La Mademoiselle d'Or has travelled for a very long time and has seen many things since she was moulded in clay by my father in Singapore in 1940. I look at her burnished gold face with its red lips and black eyebrows and wish she could tell me her story. As I was only 2 years old when she was created, I cannot remember her, but photos from that time show her displayed among other portraits in my father's Singapore studio. What happened to her after she was left on the sideboard in our lovely Malayan Bungalow house after we were deported to Australia as enemy aliens? Where did she go when the impregnable British fortress of Singapore fell to the advancing Japanese army in 1942? Who saved her from disappearing like so many of my father's other Singapore sculptures? I'll never know the answer to these questions. It's 83 years since I saw her in my father's Singapore exhibition, but amazingly, she has survived. The clearly incised inscription, Karl Duldig, Singapore 1940, underneath, brought her to my attention when her photo was posted on the internet a few months ago. She was in France. My French cousin, Yves, the son of my mother's sister Aurélie, has enabled La Mademoiselle d'Or to travel across the world and become part of my life again. And these are for you. You can hand them all around. So that's the story, and that's the long lost gem revealed. Thank you very much. Okay.
Just why do you think he painted it, or did Karl?
That's the next question. Did
Those
you?
are the questions
We don't know.
never know.
We will never know.
We don't know whether he painted it. We don't know if he didn't, who painted it. We don't, if he did paint it, why did ask her.
Yeah. She's the one up there.
Yeah,
the one
totally
up there
different.
is painted black.
That's Stefan. I think that's salt glaze on that one, don't you? Yeah,
It's a glaze.
There's quite a lot of sculptures that Dad did in Singapore where salt glaze. Can you just explain that a bit, Stefan, for me, because it's always better when you the technique.
Actually, it's very soft in the kiln while it's hot. And it vaporizes and the salt forms a glaze on the surface of the piece.
It's a mineral. It forms a glaze. And you can see it in tiles on the roofs, the dark red flashes of tiles, that's salt glaze. And in bricks sometimes, some bricks have got
glossy. Yeah, that's it.
And
okay.
that's probably, and the the firm, the Alexander Brickworks, which Dad worked with in Singapore, Brickworks, they would have had it in their kilns. So if he's firing, which he didn't have his own kiln, he was firing a lot of his work there. And so it was obviously fired there as well. Yes, so that was my first question too, Kate. Yes, what else could I yes,
It's very different to a lot of the other work. That's why I said it's got this very modern look to it. Whether it's the painting, it's also the shape. A lot of the works have a sort of more of a Greek and Roman sort of antiquity type of feel to them. That one to me looks very, very modern.
And to me, she looks Egyptian.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of place her, you know, there's always this inspiration of Nefertiti and Dad's
Yes,
you know, there. And whereas you could say, okay, that's Nefertiti even with the crown, which it isn't. But it is inspired very much. A lot of these works are, even the one next to her has got that. They're very much inspired by the Indian women Dad was seeing walking around Singapore carrying these bowls
and things on their heads.
And a lot of the sculptures, the larger sculptures have this almost a vessel on the head which he was carrying. I, as I said, I'm glad that you put your own interpretation onto it, because that's what's needed. You know, that's that we all have to think for ourselves. Yeah.
Eva, so when I saw her on the internet, as one does, so Anthony and I both have searches on eBay, you know, that send you a message if something comes up with the name, and then we talk to each other, so we're not bidding against each other. So I thought the gold was completely wrong. I didn't think that the gold was right. Is it glaze or is it paint?
Well, Stefan, can I get some opinion from you?
I haven't looked at it closely, but you see, originally it was just black. So it's possibly paint.
Yes.
To me, it looks wrong to
We
the gold.
would have to put in a chemical, you know, test or something.
to see.
If it wasn't done by Dad, which could be that it's done in Europe later. Remember I said, I read out on the back of that catalogue, Belgian consul. Something was bought by the Belgian consul, but I'm not sure what. But he would have been one of those people who did get out on time and could have taken things with him. And he could have taken it. And Belgium's not far from France. And by now, you know, the Belgian consul and his children might have all vanished or disappeared or died off or whatever. So it's timely, possibly it's come from there. But if at some point somebody thought, oh, I don't like the black, I'm going to organise for someone to paint this,
which is what
they might have given instructions to do that. Whoever did it has done a jolly good job. That's my opinion. I mean, I have had her sitting, Belinda knows, my daughter-in-law, on my dining room table ever since I got her, which is now 2 or 3 months ago or more. And I can't stop looking at her. She has a sort of mesmerising quality that is quite extraordinary. So that's kind of my opinion. You know, it's a subtle. It's a very beautifully done, whoever did it. And I can think of my father was often decorating even his stone carvings. He himself decorated works, but then the one that springs to mind, and this I only found out also by accident, is there was a very large life-size sculpture like the Echo at the back, and in St Mary's Church in Altona. Yes, the Madonna, the Brickyard Madonna. And would you believe it, the last time I went out, which must be now 8-9 years ago, somebody had decided to paint all the drapery blue. How can you do that? How can you do that to my father's sculpture? And I looked at it and I thought, that's rather nice. And when you go in there and you look at some of Dad's terracottas, he's often used this pale blue himself to decorate, because the pale blue looks great. That terracotta colour. That's kind of a little bit along those lines.
Just a thought that if your dad did do it, I have a thing about painting with bronze, and the reason that I have this thing is about the mask, and about my parents not speaking of what had gone on, what had happened. And every time I come in and I see the masks, that gives me that same feeling. And whether if he did do it, there's a possibility that might have.
He didn't know yet. In 1940, when we were in Sydney, the first we heard about the disaster for our family was when we were here in 1943. So in 1940 there was still hope, and they were still in touch with both sides of the family in Poland. It was only once war was declared that communication stopped. But even then you retained hope till you heard there was no hope. So it wasn't until really the news broke through in 1943 that certainly my father found out, and my mother found out even later. So no, in this instance, no. But there could have been a request from the Belgian consul or somebody, oh, please paint a gold or something, you know, who knows. Unanswered questions, aren't they? Yes.
I was just thinking maybe it's gold leaf or the gold sort of replacement.
It would be nice.
Gold
I don't think it's gold leaf.
No.
It's definitely more, it could have even been burnt in. It's got this, what I love about her is it's this burnished gold.
It's the shine, isn't it?
It's just absolutely terrific, and very deft handling of the lips and of the eyebrows and the eyes, very deft. Yeah. So that's it, everyone. Well, I would like to invite you all to stay and join us for cheese and biscuits and a glass of something bubbly, isn't it, Kate?
Yeah, just to say, thank you, Eva, that was lovely. And it's like a big surprise. So just to say, I mean, it underscores why we love what we do, because it never finishes. You never know what you're going to do. It's always refreshing and new, and you can never take anything for granted.
No.
You've got to dig, like forensic historians all the time, and reinterpret and re-understand, because there's always new meaning to things. And of course that's why this is dynamic and changing. And it was lovely. I just sort of think it's like a jack in the box. So I wanted to create that. I thought, oh, you know, this sort of gives us a nice